Hey everybody. So I went and saw Ghostbusters. Let me start with this. I really love the original Ghostbusters. It's a classic. I mean, there's no denying it. It's a classic. Ghostbusters 2, a little less so. Still enjoyable, but mainly for what it makes you think of, which is Ghostbusters 1. That said, those movies still exist. They always will. They will exist with that cast, that crew, those effects, those lines of dialogue. They're always going to exist. Which is why I'm not in the least bit bothered by the idea of them doing this new Ghostbusters with the all-female cast. I don't know. It's not a remake. I guess it's a reboot. I think what it really is Universal saw that there is more that can be done. Or is it Warner Brothers? Oh my goodness. The production company realized that there's more that can be done with that franchise. And they've been talking about doing Ghostbusters 3 forever. And maybe it would have happened had Harold Ramis not died. But we don't have that option anymore. Because, let's be honest, a Ghostbusters without Harold Ramis, nobody really wants that. So, going into this movie, I did not hold it up to any standard. I welcomed it as its own thing. Because it can't ruin your childhood. Your childhood's still there, man. Get the DVDs. That movie is exactly the same. Making new movies with the same name doesn't erase it. It just adds to it. Right? So, I went and saw the Ghostbusters. And we'll do this like I do most reviews. We'll do spoiler-free, and then some spoilers at the end, and I'll warn you when the change happens. I liked it. I liked it a lot. It's a good movie. I wouldn't say it's a great movie for a multitude of reasons, but it was good. It was enjoyable. It was a decent action film. It was a decent comedy. And honestly, it was decent at being spooky. So, there you go. 3 genres that it pulled off pretty well. I'm not going to try and compare it to the original in terms of quality or which one I prefer more, because that's not fair. The original has 30 years of history behind it and memories of childhood. It's different. It's very different, and it doesn't pretend not to be different. Sorry, apparently at some point I woke up Siri. The comedy is a lot different. In fact, there's a couple levels of comedy going on here, and I'm going to apologize for this. I'm not great with names, so sometimes I'll be using the actress's name, sometimes I'll be using the character name, and I'll switch back and forth, and I apologize for that. But there's a couple different levels of comedy going on here, because Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy together do a very low-key comedy. Kristen Wiig usually does the kind of mumbly comedy, which is good. When it works, I like it. Doesn't always work. When she's with Melissa McCarthy, they kind of share that, even though Melissa McCarthy is usually bigger over-the-top humor, which is still in here. There's quirky oddball comedy coming from Kate McKinnon, who absolutely steals this movie. Every scene she is in, she is the center of your attention. Which is a shame, because the character Patty also tries to do this over-the-top comedy. And if it wasn't for Kate McKinnon, she would probably be the show stealer. But she's not, because Kate McKinnon just owns this movie. There is subtle humor, there is over-the-top humor, there is some physical humor. That I like. Not all of the jokes worked for me. Not all of the jokes connected for me. But they were shot out in such a rapid-fire fashion. There were so many different comedy from so many different angles going on that even the jokes that don't work, at least for me, didn't detract from the experience, because you weren't sitting there for 30 seconds in what was meant to be the funny spot going, okay, that joke was awful, can we move on with the story? The story just keeps going, and the jokes just keep coming. So I appreciated that. Even in the opening scene, there was... the jokes were played such that it took a couple of people in the theater I was in a couple of beats to figure out, oh my god, those were jokes, that was funny. Because it was just kind of slipped in right from the opening scene. This movie's also a lot harder on the action than the original Ghostbusters. I know I'm not supposed to be comparing, but I'm just kind of, I don't know. I'm not saying that these things are a bad thing. I think it's okay to compare as long as you understand they're their own separate things. This movie did not have to match up to the old ones in any way, shape, or form. It gets to be its own thing. So, there was a lot more action in these, in this new one. A lot more gadgets, a lot more special effects, and some of that's just going to be because of technology and time. We're able to do that. But also, I think the original could have been more action-oriented if it wanted to be. It wasn't. The original was primarily comedy-oriented, which is fine. I love the original. There were a couple little scares in there, and there was a little bit of tension and drama, but primarily it was a comedy. This is an action comedy with some horror elements thrown in. It's a new Ghostbusters for a new age. And let me say this, too. And I may be wrong on this, because I don't know if you can tell, I'm a guy. So I'm not really the best licensed person to talk about this. But at no point did I think of this as a feminist film. I'm aware it's 4 main characters who are women. But I didn't think of the original Ghostbusters as a masculine film. I thought of it as a film. Or a comedy film. But I didn't feel like it had a masculine propaganda that it was trying to push. Same thing here. At no point did I feel like this movie was trying to push a feminist propaganda. The movie, the way it's shot, it's like we're just following the exploits of this group of people who came together to do this. I mean, it just happened to be a group of women. Groups of women exist. Groups of men exist. And mixed groups exist. This just happened to be all chicks. Now, if you want to read into it, girl power and feminine empowerment, by all means, go ahead. All I'm saying is one of the complaints that's coming out is that it's this feminist propaganda or this feminist agenda that's being pushed because it's got to be all chicks, and I didn't feel that way when I saw it. I felt like it was just a movie. See, I don't want to spoil too much. It's a decent movie. You should go see it. I enjoyed it. I will say this. Spoiler section, eh? At the end, there's a rescue scene that I felt was absolutely ridiculous. It was unnecessary. It set up a really good joke, so I'm almost okay with it. But the rescue thing was absolutely stupid, and I didn't feel like it worked at all. One last thing I want to talk about is cameos. Oh my goodness. Anybody who has an issue with this because it's not the original, you really don't have a leg to stand on. Because all of the surviving main cast members, except for Rick Moranis, who doesn't act anymore, show up in cameos in this. And they didn't have to do that. And Dan Aykroyd, the original writer, has gone out and talked about how much he supports this and how much he likes this movie. He didn't have to do that. I mean, sure, he gets money off of it, but it is also his legacy you're talking about. These actors were not going to... Bill Murray has been, from the stories I've heard, the main reason there hasn't been a Ghostbusters 3, because it was hard to come to terms with him to get him to agree to do another sequel, but he showed up in this. So they've got the vote of the original cast for this remake. All of the originals. Ernie Hudson's in there. Sigourney Weaver. Oh, by the way, stick around after the credits. There actually is a scene after the credits. I was the only person in a theater who stayed, and there was a scene there. Ernie Hudson, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray. And Annie Potts. I was going to say Janine Melnick, but Annie Potts. All show up. All have solid, enjoyable cameos. And if you look very closely near the beginning of the movie, they actually have a bust, because it's in a university, so you see this bust that I'm fairly certain is Harold Ramis. I liked it. If you like comedy, if you like comedy action, if you like any of the actresses who are starring in it, go see it. It wasn't the greatest movie ever made. Like I said, there were some jokes that I just meh. But again, it didn't draw away from it didn't pull me out of the experience. The action sequences were a lot of fun. The one or two jump scares were unnecessary. I'm just not a big fan of jump scares. Because almost any idiot can make people in an audience go, "Ugh," by doing a jump scare. But I feel like it worked much better than it failed to work. There was more of it that gelled and worked than didn't. So my recommendation is go and see it if you're on the fence. I don't think you'll regret it. I don't think you'll see it as a waste of your money, unless you're one of those people who insist that it ruins your childhood to have something share the same name as something you liked as a kid. And again, I don't understand that argument. That thing you liked still exists. Here's something else you might also like. Anyway, there's your movie review. I'll see you guys later.
Hi, I'm Luke Bryan, 2-time CMA Entertainer of the Year. If I ever learn how to read, I'm going to read The Great Platypus Caper by Jeff Hillary because I believe in supporting fine literature. I'm Luke Bryan. Hi.